All right, let's look at the pros and cons of the Carolina Panthers hiring Dave Canales as their new head coach. Starting with the cons, and we're going to go with con number one, is Carolina Panthers were the only interested party. Only one. Dave Canales did not have another interview. Everybody else, pretty much in this coaching cycle, your Ben Johnsons, your Bobby Slowicks, Dan Quinn, Raheem Morris, all of these guys had multiple interviews. Even Thomas Brown. Thomas Brown had himself a handful of interviews. Ejiro Evero. Nobody else was interested in Dave Canales. And why is that? That's a bit of a question that I think needs answered. Con number two is experience. He's been in the NFL for, I think, 14 years, maybe 13 years. I can't remember exactly. 2010, I think it was, when he joined Pete Carroll at the Seahawks. In a number of different positions, he was an assistant quarterback coach, quality control coach, senior quarterback coach, and wide receivers coach. A bunch of jobs, but at a higher grade. He's only really had 1 year as an offensive coordinator. That's the highest position he's ever held in his career, and he's only done it for 1 year. And while the Bucs had a good year last year, it wasn't great. They topped the worst division in the NFL. The 9-8 record the Bucs had. That's not fantastic. And at one point they were 4-7 as well, so it wasn't like it was the perfect year for the Bucs. Con number three, and this sort of links in with number one, is why did David Tepper want him? What is in it for David Tepper? Because you know David Tepper likes control. You know he's not just going to let Canales and Dan Morgan do what they want to do. They're going to have to report everything to him. This goes back to number one, being the only interested party. Is that because Canales knew it was an easy job? Because it was an offer and only one offer? It's a higher grade than what he was at as an offensive coordinator. He's upping himself to a head coach. Was that opportunity too good to turn down for Canales? And was it because nobody else was interested? Is it because David Tepper knew that he was going to get a guy who didn't have any other offers, so he was going to bring him in and be able to sort of manipulate him in a way, be the dictator that we know he can be? And onto the pros now, and we're going to start with number one, relationships. Particularly that with GM Dan Morgan. This is the first time, I believe, since I think I heard it was about 2000. The Carolina Panthers are really starting afresh with a new head coach and GM simultaneously. In previous years under Tepper, we lost one or the other, and there was no alignment. And I think alignment is really, really important. And these two do have a connection. We're seeing them at the last game of last season when Canales was still at the Bucs. They went in high fives and had a bit of a talk and a hug. So you know that there's a relationship there. They worked together at the Seattle Seahawks, so they know each other. And I think Dan Morgan getting the GM job was a big part of getting Canales in as the head coach. He probably came highly recommended to David Tepper from Dan Morgan. And also looking at his backroom staff, it looks as if we're going to get in Brad Idzik, who was the wide receivers coach at the Bucs. He's going to come in as the offensive coordinator and not call plays. Canales is going to be calling the plays. Idzik is just going to be coming in, basically trying to do what Thomas Brown did, but better last year, not as the play caller. Frank Reich done that. But also, it came out today that they are bringing in Harold Goodwin as the assistant head coach and run game coordinator, who had that exact same job at the Bucs last year, and Joe Gilbert, who was the offensive line coach. He's coming in to be the Carolina Panthers offensive line coach. So there's a lot of guys between them three assistant coaches and Dan Morgan. That's a bunch of people that Canales knows and is comfortable with, so I'm sure he's going to get the best out of them. Pro number two is his reputation. He's coming in as this offensive guru, and I know nothing really kind of shows to be that good because of only 1 year as the offensive coordinator of the Bucs. As I mentioned, they didn't really have the best of seasons last year. It was good, and he got the best out of Baker Mayfield, but he's coming in as this guy that knows how to run an offense. He's done wonders as both the wide receivers coach and the quarterbacks coach at the Seattle Seahawks. And he just seems to know how to run an offense. His play calling seems to be great, and everybody who's worked with him has only good things to say about him. Even Buccaneers fans loved him last year and were devastated to see him go. But I think the praise from Pete Carroll particularly Pete Carroll brought him from, I'm sure he was like an intern or something at USC in college in 2009, 2010, before moving to the Seahawks. And he brought him with him and moved him up, wide receivers coach, assistant quarterback coach, quality control guy. Like, he had all of these jobs, and Pete Carroll said he is the future. He is going to be a head coach. If he believes in him, someone as experienced and as quality as what Pete Carroll was in his career, if he's got these good things to say about them, then that sounds good enough for me. As well as all of the other players that's played for Canales, like Rachaad White, the Buccaneers running back last year. He only had good things to say about him. He enjoyed that relationship, and I feel like Canales got the best out of White, and that relationship seemed to have worked brilliantly. And that ties in nicely with pro number 3, which is his work with other players, particularly quarterbacks. He was the quarterback coach at the Seattle Seahawks, winning a Super Bowl, as well as the wide receivers coach, working with a bunch of guys like Doug Baldwin, Golden Tate, Jermaine Kearse, Tyler Lockett, and Russell Wilson, of course. Like, Russell Wilson was at his best during them sort of 2013-14 days when they went to 2 Super Bowls, winning 1. So Canales does have a Super Bowl ring, but his reputation has only got better these last 2 years with his work in 2022 with Geno Smith, who looked like he was out of the league pretty much. He's over 30. He'd been a bit of a journeyman, a backup guy, but he got paid because of that performance that he had at the Seattle Seahawks in 2022. Nobody really expected anything from the Seahawks in 2022 when the only options were either Geno Smith or Drew Lock. Nothing really seemed that promising. I'm sure Seahawks fans were concerned at that, looking at it, who's going to be the number 1, because it definitely wasn't Geno at that time. It could quite easily have been Lock. But what Canales done with Geno Smith as the quarterback's coach got him paid, got that reputation up, and got Canales a move to the offensive coordinator job at the Buccaneers, where he teamed up with Baker Mayfield, who was with the Carolina Panthers in 2022 and was horrendous. He was another guy that seemed like he was on his way out of the NFL after being thrown away by the Browns, picked up by the Panthers, didn't even stay out the season. I think he was released after about week 10. Didn't go to plan. And yeah, it didn't really look like Baker had much of a future. I think last season at the Buccaneers, it was probably a similar type of situation to Geno Smith in the sense that, yeah, he was probably going to be the starter, but for how long? I don't think Baker was brought there to be the long-term answer at Tampa Bay, but based on his performances last year, he's going to get a new deal. So 2 years out of 2 at 2 different teams, 2 different quarterbacks, Canales' work has got these 2 guys paid. And that is, I think, the main reason why David Tepper's brought Canales in. So hopefully he can do the same thing with Bryce Young. And with that being said, a side note before going on to the final pro is that I think I heard that Bryce Young was in on this interview process. Maybe it's not the interview process, but he was asked his opinion. And as the guy who the head coach was going to come in to lead, I think getting the quarterback's opinion is really, really valuable. And if Bryce Young gave the thumbs up, he must have seen Canales' work, what he can do with offenses, how to call plays and develop quarterbacks. If Bryce Young gave him the thumbs up, then yeah, that's brilliant. I think that's good news to me. Final pro, which kind of contradicts one of the cons in that he was inexperienced, and why did David Tepper bring him in now? And he was the only interested party. He could be the future. Yes, he was only interviewed by one team, which was the Carolina Panthers, didn't really have much interest, inexperienced in the sense that he was only an offensive coordinator for 1 year. But he could be the future, based on what Pete Carroll said and a bunch of other guys, the reputation that he brings in. He's going to be a head coach sooner or later. If it wasn't this year, it could have been next, maybe it's even the year afterwards, but guaranteed he was going to be a head coach. He seems to have that mindset. He seems to be a genius of play calling and of running offenses. So maybe it's a good thing that we've got him in now. Maybe it's premature, yes, but maybe it was a good thing that Tepper acted now. Like I say, it could be premature. Maybe we're not going to see the best out of Canales in year 1. Maybe it's even year 2. I think it's kind of good that we've took him off the market now, because if in 2-3 years' time he does show to be this genius, he could have done with maybe a little bit more time in Tampa Bay to be the offensive coordinator. But I think we've maybe struck while the iron's hot. We've got in now while we can, while nobody else is interested in bringing him in as the head coach. Maybe it's Tepper and this Sportsology team or whatever it is, or the recommendation from Dan Morgan, Tepper's thought, we'll get him in now because, yeah, we could have a future with this guy. He could be our head coach for the next 10 to 15 years if he's good enough. So we'll get him in now while nobody else is interested, and he could potentially in 5 years' time be the best head coach in the NFL. Those were my pros and cons of hiring Dave Canales as the new head coach of the Carolina Panthers. Let me know what you think. Give this a like and let me know what you think in the comments, as well as subscribe and follow the Panthers Magpie on all social media accounts.